So welcome back, everybody, and we're back in the studio, in the podcast studio, for another session of Filtering the Noise with ATP Enable. But there's somebody missing. There's nobody from ATP Enable here today. We banned Richard Nesbitt from this podcast today because we thought we'd have some free-flowing conversation between our two guests here. Previously on a podcast, I spoke about people who are making change happen. And listening back on both Jess's and Paul's podcast, I'm sure you'll agree that actually these people sitting on the couch are truly passionate about making change happen. So let's go over to you, Paul. Why don't you just give us a little bit of a background to you very quickly for people who may not have seen the previous podcasts?
Yeah. Cool. Okay, well, I think as far as this is concerned, I founded something called the Digital Poverty Alliance that was set up before the pandemic, but then really came into its own then. And I think it was mainly because what we'd found was that everybody's kind of interested in digital inclusion, interested in the problems that it can help to solve and things, but doing it on their own everywhere. And so what we felt was this is an issue for everybody. So what we wanted to do is to draw together absolutely people like Jess and local authorities and national government, but alongside companies and NGOs to try to solve the problem together. So that's how I'm best known. I'm not any longer working there, but it continues to be a passion. I'm now with an organisation actually connecting people called unconnected.org, but around the world in places like Africa and Asia.
Really interesting. And Jess, why don't you give sort of a top level overview of what you're doing?
You may recognise me from such movies as because yours was so grandiose, and I'm from Essex County Council, which I'm very proud of. I'm the Digital Inclusion Lead Officer, and I work with amazing councillors who advocate our work with businesses, with charities, with community volunteering services. And I have the opportunity to work across the council because digital is in everything. It's like this big octopus with its tentacles in absolutely everything. So it's an enabler for everything that we do. It's a fantastic job. It's never ending. It's very challenging, but I love it.
Fantastic. Well, the reason we've got you both back on the sofa is you're so both passionate about this subject, about digital inclusion and connectivity. So we thought we'd just... There's no script really for this today. Let's just have a conversation. So what's the common ground? So what's the commonality between you both, do you see?
For me, it's actually just about helping people get on.
Yeah.
Right? I've been on the planet longer than you, and I sometimes I look back and I think I'm not sure anything's really changed. The number of people in abject poverty continues to be a real worry for me. And so the idea of digital for me is that it just gives some people some control back over their lives. Yeah. It enables them to do the things that they need to do when they need to do them, whether that's learning or finding a job or signing on or whatever it might be. It just gives them some opportunity to do that. And the other thing for me is specialist groups like carers and people. It means that they can do the things when they need to do them as well. Otherwise, it's this whole thing about, starts at 9 o'clock and ends at 5 o'clock, but that's not when the problems happen. The problems happen at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And it means that they can at least get on and find some advice and some support and that kind of stuff. So ultimately, and I guess it's the same for you, it's about helping people move
100%.
on.
So I could just, shorten that down slightly
and
say,
I'm sorry.
And say, agree with you 100% there. But so the key words that you've kind of brought out there are what we're trying to do is empower people to be better enabled at living independently with choice. I think they're probably the key things that we're trying to do.
Yeah, terrific.
Because so much of what we do now forces people online, and you will get a group of individuals, neo-Luddites, I believe they're called, who absolutely don't want to engage with that. But you also get people who are frightened of it, so they're kind of easier to work with a little bit. And then you get people who have absolutely no choice, would love to be online, and just simply can't afford it and don't have those skills. So we're on a par there with what we're trying to do, because we both see digital inclusion as the sort of the leveler, the enabler to do everything that we consider as societal norms, I suppose.
Yeah. It was interesting you used the word neo there, because there's a really good piece of research, and it uses the word neo in it. I can't remember what the title is. I'll see if I can remember before the end. And what that says is, unfortunately, what tends to happen in this area, in every area, but actually in digital as well, is that people think they know what people want. You know, people in poverty, what they need is just give them a computer and off they go kind of thing, you know. But it's so much more...
Assumptions are really dangerous in this space.
Absolutely. And one of the things I find really odd is that people don't ask people enough what they want, you know. And one of the great things about you, I'm really jealous of you actually, because I've spent so much time ending up with kind of policy and all this kind of stuff, and in reality I want to see real change on the ground and stuff, and you get to do that. You get to see real people moving on in their lives.
Don't get me wrong, I still get my challenges there.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, the policy bits and the making decisions and the frustrations around that. And one of the things that I've done recently that I'm super proud of is that, you know, we've looked at our impacts and equalities assessment form to get in front of any decisions that are made, any new projects, any new products that kind of go out into our communities. We're kind of looking at this and saying, well, what is the potential impact? So if this is something that's going online, what's the impact on those local communities if they can't get online? So looking at digital exclusion risk, we've developed our own indicator that kind of covers all of these things. So it looks at deprivation indices, it looks at mobile and connectivity data. We can't share the mobile, but we can share the connectivity in terms of broadband. We've got a map that we overlay over the top of that, which is all the digital inclusion initiatives that we know of. We always have to caveat that in Essex, so that we can pinpoint what's happening where, what it looks like, and then say, that place there is really struggling for these things around digital inclusion. Let's focus our attention on that. So we can use the digital exclusion risk indicator to enable people who are making those key impactful decisions and changes in policy, procedure, products to look at this and go, we need to rethink this and actually put something in place to support that.
Yeah, no, I agree. You said earlier on when something really important, which is about having the support of the councillors and things, and I think that's been really important. For me, once you do that, once you put something in writing that says we need to do this, then it flows through everything you do, rather than keep having to kind of, we need to do it for that, we need to do it for that. In Scotland, they have a digital literacy policy about education, which says it treats digital literacy with the same seriousness as literacy and numeracy.
Yeah, well, they all go hand in hand, and financial literacy too.
Absolutely, but once that's in writing, once the government, or particularly the government or whoever's leading has put that in writing, they're then obliged to make sure that happens. You know, and having said that, I know that in Scotland they've struggled a little bit, even though they've had some really fantastic work going on, because it's super complicated and expensive, and we know that there's the costs involved. Funding's absolutely crucial in this space, isn't it?
Absolutely. So funding, wow. What a thing to kind of, have we moved you along a little bit there?
No, I'm just, this is the easiest podcast interview I've ever had to do, I can tell you. Well, yeah, why don't you continue that theme? Why don't you talk about funding?
Funding, oh my God.
Yeah.
Where do you start?
So, we all struggle with it.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned previously that digital inclusion, or digital exclusion rather, is kind of everybody's problem and no one's responsibility. And we focus largely on, let's empower community volunteering services, charities to do the doing around digital inclusion, with kind of not a huge amount in the way of funding behind that. And these are services that are frontline, and sometimes they're able to offer a great service for a little period of time, and then that funding goes, and along goes all of the support that was behind it. And in communities where there's a lack of trust already for the local authority and various things like that happening, when you do that and you put money there and then take it away, that relationship that you've tried desperately hard to build up is gone in an instant. So I try and look at pockets of funding that exist that are a little bit unicorny. Nobody really knows about them. They're a little bit difficult. One of those is Section 106. Mm-hmm. So this is, I'm glad you know about it. So Section 106 is it's planning money. So every time something new gets built, big organisations, so like your local authorities, the anchor institutions, will have conversations and say, right, so if we're getting X amount of people who come and live in this location, we're going to need a new school. We might need apprentices to come in and do some of the building so that we get something out of this. And it all tracks back to social value and that kind of wonderful, wonderful piece that we have there. So Section 106 is an interesting one because if we're focusing on digital inclusion, and one of the biggest drivers that we've got is health. So we know that digital inclusion is a driver and enabler for health equalities, NHS app, all of those things. Then if money exists within Section 106 that's linked to the NHS in a particular area, and we want to create something that supports the local community in driving up the NHS app, teaching people all those things, we should be able to access that money. And it's not little pots of money either. It's quite substantial there. But there are difficulties, certainly in some of the conversations I've had in accessing that, because the caveats are so small on what you can use this money on. So Section 106 is one of those, like residual value, where you can talk about devices.
We could talk about that.
Yeah,
for a few
and
hours,
then and then one of my difficulties that I struggle with is pupil premium.
Yes, absolutely.
So I know schools are really struggling. I've been on a board of governors, so I know all about how difficult this is, and they're like these beautiful swans that just appear on the surface to be looking like they're doing a great job, and they are doing a great job to the best of their ability, but they're scrabbling about underneath that, trying to find money, filling holes in their roofs with rack roofing and meals and all these sorts of difficulties. Pupil premium really is a pot of funding that ideally central government could kind of look at and say, we recognise that there are X amount of disadvantaged kids in the UK that probably don't have a device at home, probably don't have connectivity, and we could find out who they are. Quite easy to do, just a quick survey. Let's use some of this pupil premium funding to ensure that they have access online, because we know that every kid now has to do their homework online.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sure.
So there is an incredible statistic that I think it's 70% of kids who are excluded are likely to be from a disadvantaged background and therefore didn't have a device to begin with. So you can see that pattern of, I've gone to school, I was already disadvantaged, you've told me everything's online, I've got no connectivity at home, no phone, no nothing, I can't do my homework, so I can't tell you about this because I don't want to tell you that I'm struggling. Attitudes change, behaviours change, they get into trouble, it escalates, and they're excluded.
Absolutely. So do you think there's a priority then when we talk about digital inclusion? Is it within the education sector? Is that where it's got to be focused on first, or are we saying it's got to be focused on health or the older generation? I hate to prioritise, and obviously on the previous podcast we've been talking about ATP Enable, we've been talking about the ability to put these protected SIMs in, so when you are distributing this technology, it's protecting that younger society in age appropriate material that they can access. So okay, tick, we've sorted that if everybody accepts that technology. But would you say there's a priority to focus on that first, or is it the whole picture?
I know, absolutely. When I've been asked that question before about priorities, I have to say that's a personal call. Honestly, I think for us it would have to be children and youngsters and stuff, because what we want to do is equip them and their families. Often that's the thing about this.
That's the point.
To begin to.
Sure.
But for instance, if you're an older person now unable to get online in order to get a hospital appointment, and you're their son or daughter, then you'd have to say, there's the priority. I think everybody's got a part to play in this. And one of the conversations, Jess, you and I are going to have more about is about whose responsibility this is, and companies, for instance. Something like, there's an organisation called Future.now.
Yes.
Something like a third or more of existing staff members don't have digital skills.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there's something that they could be doing, and they don't offer it, by the way. By and large, companies don't offer digital training. It's again another issue around there. So they could be investing in their people to help them to get online and go on. You,
100% they could.
something.
Yeah. So so I keep moving the mic. So there's a difficulty with businesses. So we've chatted about, you know, making this the responsibility of you know, everybody, including businesses who, if they invested in this, my goodness me, we would move the needle so much.
Yep.
And I think businesses are missing a trick in understanding the fact that there's 6.9 million people who aren't online. They could be your customers.
Yep.
They could contribute more to the economy if you could help them get online.
Yeah.
Equally, you know, understanding the current skills that your employees have and doing a skills audit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
If we did that properly, can you imagine local authorities across the UK who spend millions of pounds probably on consultants
Yes.
could say, right, we've got all these people in our organisation, so 6,000, whatever. We've done a skills audit, and we know that when we interviewed them for the job, they came to us with those skills, but actually they've got these skills in project management and this, right? So they could say, we've got this project coming up and we need these skills, right? If I can second you into this and you into that, brilliant.
Yeah.
You would save millions.
Yes, absolutely.
In you know,
It's almost like they
consultancy
need
fees.
the incentive. I mean, big business, we know how it works, don't we? It's almost like, right, if you can incentivize them to do it,
Yeah.
for whatever that is,
Yep.
if it's something to do with tax rebate or not paying so much of that, or if you can give grants and
or
things like
you
that.
make it painful for them.
For them, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the painful bit is the bit that we were talking about, which is we go about our daily lives, we all live in a bubble. It's not until that bubble is burst that we go, oh,
Yo, hang on a minute.
oh, that's difficult. That's hard. You've made that difficult for me. So in speaking the language of businesses, they don't know what's hard until you tell them. So I can go about and I can say, Stephen Bartlett, all your stuff that you're selling on social media, you know, the marketing that you do, you will never reach X amount of customers. Well, that's not painful for him yet. But if we kind of look at things like the opportunity cost, we were talking about diversity, equality, inclusion. So we know that productivity increases by 33% roughly if you have a DEI, fantastic kind of program of activity that happens in your organisation. We also know that most of the people that we're looking at in terms of this pool of diversity, equality and inclusion will be digital excluded.
Yep.
So if businesses aren't joining that rally cry of getting people online, they miss out on 33% productivity because every job pretty much now is online. And there are people that will never see those jobs that you're advertising to come into your organisation. For me, that's painful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's what I talk about when I'm thinking about, you know, how do we speak the language of business enough to get them interested in something they're just walking around doing their thing.
They need to invest, don't they? And there are some big organisations out there doing it. So Unconnected, that I'm doing some work with at the moment, they have got, they're doing lots of work with Starlink, right? So Starlink essentially are providing the low Earth orbit satellites, which you can just pop on the top of a roof of a school and things, and literally switch it on and off you go, right? A lot of these places have solar power and things, but some of them have electricity and that kind of stuff. And you think, why are they doing that, right? And the answer, it's they're doing it partly because it's great for the community and stuff, but it's partly a kind of marketing exercise, isn't it? The more people that are online, the more people that are going to be able to access a wider range of benefits and stuff. And and so for instance, Vodafone too, I was brilliant that the work that fantastic that they were handing out all of those SIM cards during that time. With the caveat, which I know you've talked about before, which is that doing it perhaps without thinking through about the reality of a youngster putting one of his SIM cards in the phone and then having access to whatever they want.
But they don't want to. Those big commercial phone companies, they don't want to choke content. They want you to be using content.
Yes, but they do want to do. I'm sure they want to do it kind of ethically and morally and everything right and stuff. But there's no compunction on them to do it. And to a certain extent, I suppose what they want to do is put that responsibility on others and things. But the reality is that this is all a marketing exercise. For them. if they are able to put SIM cards in the hands of people who otherwise don't have them or can't afford them and things, what happens in reality is that once people begin to get used to using the internet because they've got a device now and they've got some connectivity and stuff, they begin to plan it into their lives because they can see the value of it for them as a wider family and things. And it becomes something that they can begin to budget. Because the reality is large numbers of people in the UK, you talked about 6.9 million people, and again, it depends on how you define that, doesn't it? Is that large numbers of them could afford something. It may not be everything that they want. And the analogy I use is about, which you touched on in your podcast, is around transport. Which is to say, in the old days, everybody used to have to walk everywhere. And then I don't think equities, that doesn't mean everybody's going to have a Ferrari.
I think we're talking about parity.
Yes, exactly. It means that everybody, so even if you haven't got a car of your own, at least you can get some good public transport to get to where you want to get to and stuff. So from that point of view, I think there's got to be an argument for businesses particularly to invest. I don't see companies doing it. And the last thing I'd want to say on this is that a lot of this stuff the stuff you need is all there. Again,
absolutely.
So when I first got involved in this, I sat and thought, if I was going to try and solve this problem, one of the things I'd need is loads and loads of people around in different communities who can actually help. Like organisations like Digital Unite already have
absolutely
thousands of champions across the UK.
Shout out to Emma Weston.
Yep, absolutely, Emma Weston, a great hero. And there are other organisations doing this thing. So there are already people in the community, so they're ready to help to get people online and things.
Yeah.
There are already, and this is another big bugbear for you and I both, isn't it? Enough devices out there, frankly. So I've had, bits of government give us devices and bits of government say, no, we couldn't possibly do that because of confidentiality and stuff. And we all know of organisations who then go on and trash devices. And I know. Yeah. And so I'm pleased to say there's more work, more energy going on at the moment around this whole kind of refurb side of things. So everything we need is there. So the kind of money you're talking about needs to be for specialist individuals like you and the teams you've worked with to enable people to actually get on with it and things. But a lot of what we need is already there.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, that's been absolutely fascinating. I've got about another 10 questions that I would love to ask you, but unfortunately I can't because we'd run out of time for today. But I think one of the great things I'm inspired by is, I think we need to broaden the conversation. I think we need to get the diversity, bring industry in. Let's get maybe one of the big providers to come in and talk about it from a perspective. Obviously, ATP Enable are doing a great job in the amplification of their product in relation to protected SIMs.
Superb.
And it's all around that. And so when we talk about priorities and we talk about them protecting that younger community of accessing the right material, it starts there. Yeah. But let's not dismiss that wider digital inclusion piece. And I think it's been absolutely fascinating.
Well summed.
Yeah,
talking to you.
Yeah.
Great to be here with you too, Jess. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, I think you two are going to continue talking, and we'll get you back on again. I would guess.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time.
Solved it.
Yes, exactly. Day off tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks again.